We're taught not to talk about money. It's considered impolite, unromantic. In a relationship, the mantra is, what's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? The ultimate expression of trust and partnership. But that silence, that romanticized blurring of the lines, can become a weapon. It can be used to construct a cage so elegant, so gilded with gestures of love and generosity, that you don't even realize you're a prisoner. You don't realize that what's mine is yours was never the truth. The truth, in my case, was that everything I had would become his, and everything he had would remain his own. My story isn't just about a broken heart. It's about a calculated, slow-motion heist where the prize was my independence. Before I met Julian, my finances were my fortress. At 30 years old, I was a senior event planner for a major corporation in Chicago. My world was a controlled chaos of logistics, seven-figure budgets, and high-pressure deadlines, and I thrived in it. I remember standing on a gantry high above, a ballroom floor, hours before a gala I was managing, calmly directing my crew via headset as they averted a technical disaster. Down below, the client was having a meltdown, but I felt a profound sense of calm. I was the eye of the hurricane, the orchestrator. That feeling of competence was my drug of choice. It translated directly into a life I had built myself, brick by brick. I had a healthy 401k, a 6-month emergency fund meticulously saved, and a credit score that was a thing of beauty. My independence wasn't just a state of being. It was my most valued accomplishment. I didn't need a man to take care of me. I could take care of myself, and then I met Julian. He was a financial consultant, and he moved through the world with the easy, predatory grace of someone who has never been told no. He was devastatingly charming, impeccably dressed, and he pursued me with a campaign of overwhelming generosity that felt like something out of a classic movie. Our first dates were not simple coffees. They were experiences. He took me to restaurants with month-long waiting lists where the chefs knew him by name. He didn't just buy me gifts. He bought me first edition copies of my favorite books and vintage jewelry he'd stumbled upon. And he always, always paid. The first time I reached for my wallet on a date, he placed his hand gently over mine, stopping me. His smile was warm, disarming. "Ava, please," he'd said, his voice a low, convincing murmur. "A woman like you works that hard. You deserve to be taken care of. Spoiled, even. Let me do that. It's my greatest pleasure." How do you argue with that? He wasn't being macho or dismissive. He was framing his control as a form of worship. I, a woman who fought for everything, found myself disarmed. I let him pay. I let him take care of things. I mistook his need for control for an act of care. He was slowly, methodically, teaching me to stop reaching for my own wallet, and I didn't even notice the lesson plan. A year later, we were married. The first step in his financial takeover was, like everything he did, wrapped in the logic of love and partnership. He suggested we move into a bigger, more impressive apartment in a more exclusive neighborhood, one that was technically a little outside what I would have budgeted for myself. "Don't you worry about a thing," he'd said, showing me the listing online. "This is our new home. We'll open a joint account for all the household bills and rent. It's just easier that way. A clean slate for our new life together." It seemed logical. It felt like the next step. The next move was the checkmate I never saw coming. He sat me down one night, pouring me a glass of obscenely expensive wine. He looked at me with an expression of profound, loving concern. "Darling," he said, taking my hand, "you are so brilliant, so organized. That corporate job is draining your soul. I see how you come home, exhausted by the politics and the endless demands. I have an idea. My consulting business is taking off. I'm drowning in work. I need you. I want you to come work with me, run the business side. You can be the coup of Miller Consulting. You can work from home, set your own hours. We'll be a power couple, partners in the truest sense of the word. The pitch was perfect. It wasn't quit your job and give up your financial independence. It was let's build an empire together. It wasn't become dependent on me. It was become my partner. I was so in love, so caught up in the vision of us as a dynamic duo taking on the world, that I agreed. I drafted my resignation letter that night, walking away from my stable, well-paying job, with its benefits and its 401k match, to become an employee of his one-man company. My salary, he explained, would be paid directly into our joint account. For simplicity, with my independent income gone, the walls of the gilded cage began to close in. A few months into our new arrangement, he sat me down for what he called a financial planning meeting. He had spreadsheets and charts prepared to really maximize our investment potential and simplify our tax burden, he explained, pointing to a complex-looking graph. We should merge everything. All our accounts, our investments, your 401k rollover. It's the smartest way to build our future. It's about optimization. He used his language. He was the financial wizard. I was the event planner. It made sense to let him drive. So I signed the papers. I watched as my substantial life savings, the fortress I had so carefully built, were absorbed into his vast and complex investment portfolio. I had officially become a passenger in my own financial life. Soon after, the concept of my money vanished completely. It was all our money, but he was the only one who held the keys to the bank. He convinced me to close my personal credit cards. They have high annual fees, darling, he explained. And it will improve our overall debt-to-income ratio, which looks better for future investments. He gave me a supplementary card on his primary account instead. An account he, of course, could monitor line by line. Then came the allowance. He sat me down again, his face serious. He said our budget required more discipline. From now on, he would transfer a set amount of money each week to a debit card for me to use for groceries and incidentals. I, a 32-year-old woman who had once managed six-figure event budgets without blinking, was now living on a weekly allowance. He started asking for receipts. It's not that I don't trust you, darling, he'd say, looking over the grocery bill with a critical eye. It's about data. We can't manage what we don't measure. He made financial abuse sound like a sound business. Strategy doubted my confidence once my defining characteristic began to erode. I felt a constant, low-grade sense of shame and helplessness. When I expressed a desire to maybe take on a small freelance event planning project, just to keep my skills sharp, he subtly sabotaged every effort. He would forget to tell me about a call from a potential client until it was too late. On the day I had an important networking lunch, he would feign a sudden, debilitating migraine, making me feel too guilty to leave his side. He always framed it as concern. Are you sure you want that stress again, Eva? Look how peaceful our life is. He had created a crisis and then sold me the solution, and the solution was always my continued dependency. The final, devastating revelation, the one that shattered the beautiful facade completely, arrived in a plain white envelope on a rainy Tuesday. It was a letter from a collections agency addressed to me at our address. It said I was 90 days past due on a credit card balance of over $20,000. I stared at it, my blood running cold. I hadn't had a credit card in my own name for 2 years. With a sense of rising dread, I did something I had never done before. I went into his pristine home office, a room I was never encouraged to enter, and started opening his files. It didn't take me long to find it. Tucked away in a folder labeled Household Administrativia was a subfolder containing statements for 3 credit cards. All had been opened in my name, using my social security number within the last 18 months. All were maxed out. He had used my once perfect credit score, my fortress, to secretly finance his lavish lifestyle, the expensive wine, the designer clothes, the gifts he bought me, all while keeping his own primary assets clean and untouched. He hadn't just been controlling me. He had been actively, systematically, and secretly ruining me. This wasn't a partnership, it was a heist. And I was the target. The discovery was a baptism by fire. The fear and shame I had been marinating in were burned away by a cold, clarifying rage. I was not a damsel in distress waiting to be rescued. I was a prisoner of war, and it was time to plan my escape. I couldn't just walk out. I had no money of my own. My credit was destroyed. He monitored our joint account daily. A dramatic confrontation would only result in him locking me down further, cutting off my access to everything. I had to become a spy in my own home. I had to fight him using his own tactics, secrecy, strategy, and meticulous planning. My quiet rebellion began that night. My mission, intelligence gathering. While he slept, I moved with a silent, purposeful fury. I used my phone to take pictures of every financial document. I could find his bank statements, his investment portfolios, and especially the statements for the secret credit cards in my name. I took photos of his tax returns. I forwarded every single image to a new secret email account I had created at the public library during one of my grocery trips. I named the account after my childhood dog, a password he could never guess. Next, I had to build an escape fund. It was a slow, demeaning, and terrifying process. I started getting extra cash back on grocery trips, telling him the store's system was acting up and I needed the cash for the farmer's market. $50. Here, $100 there. I hid the cash in the lining of an old winter coat in the back of our storage closet. I lost a $500 gift card he gave me for my birthday, only to secretly use it to buy a cheap, untraceable burner phone and a bus ticket. I sold the vintage earrings he had given me, the ones he probably bought with my own credit, to an online consignment shop. It took me 3 months to scrape together $2,000. It felt like a dragon's hoard. The final piece of my plan was to find an ally. I reached out to my older sister, Chloe, the one person he had never been able to completely alienate. I used my burner phone to call her. We met in a busy park, a place where we wouldn't be overheard. I told her everything. She was horrified, but not surprised. I knew something was wrong, Eva, she said, her eyes blazing with a protective fire. I knew he wasn't who he pretended to be. I'm with you, whatever you need. She became my lifeline, my contact on the outside. My D-Day was a Tuesday. Julian was flying to London for a 2-day business trip. I went through the motions of our morning routine. I made him coffee. I kissed him goodbye at the door, my heart pounding a steady martial rhythm against my ribs. I'll miss you, he said, holding my face in his hands. You have no idea, I replied, my voice a perfect imitation of a loving wife. The moment his car was out of the garage, I executed my plan with military precision. I packed one small suitcase with my most essential belongings. I took the burner phone and the cash. I logged onto our home computer, a machine he could access remotely, and erased my browser history. Then I created a new folder on the desktop. I named it Project Nightingale. Inside, I placed a single document, a detailed bullet-pointed list of my findings, complete with account numbers and dates. It was my insurance policy. I took my personal phone, the one he tracked, and dropped it into a glass of water on the kitchen counter, watching it die. I walked out the door, didn't look back, and got into my sister's waiting car. The legal battle was hell. He tried to claim I was an unstable, vengeful spouse who had run off in a fit of pique. He denied everything. But I had my evidence. I had the paper trail. I had Project Nightingale. It took a year of fighting, a year of living in my sister's spare room and working 2 jobs to pay my legal fees, but I won. The fraudulent debt was legally assigned to him, and the divorce was finalized. It's been 3 years since my great escape. Rebuilding my financial life from nothing has been the hardest thing I've ever done, but I did it. I worked, I saved, I went to credit counseling, and I went back to school. Today, I have my own small business. I'm a certified financial planner, but I don't work for wealthy investors. My firm specializes in forensic accounting and financial planning for women who are trying to leave abusive situations. I teach them how to look for hidden accounts. I teach them how to document fraud. I teach them how to build a secret life raft when they feel like they're drowning. I took the weapons that were used against me and I turned them into tools for liberation for others. My life isn't lavish anymore, but it's mine. Every dollar in my bank account, every bill I pay, every single coffee I buy, it's a testament to my freedom. Julian thought money was power, and he was right. But the greatest power isn't in having it. It's in earning it yourself and in knowing, without a shadow of a doubt, that no one can ever take it from you again. The years following my escape and the grueling legal battle that ensued were not just about rebuilding, they were about reforging. I had been dismantled, piece by piece, by a man who used love as a tool and finance as a weapon. In my new life, I decided to take those very weapons and turn them into shields for others. I opened a small specialized firm, Nightingale Financial Advocacy. The name was a quiet nod to Project Nightingale, the secret escape plan that had been my lifeline. My mission was simple. I helped women untangle the complex financial webs spun by abusive and controlling partners. I was part a forensic accountant, part a financial planner, and part a battle-hardened strategist. My trauma had become my expertise. My scars were my credentials. My business was successful, but my life was quiet. I lived with the calm, ordered peace of a soldier who had returned from a long and brutal war. I trusted my own judgment implicitly, and I found a deep, satisfying purpose in my work. I thought the chapter of my life involving men like Julian was purely academic, now a case study I would use to help others, but never one I would have to live through again. Then Sarah walked into my office. She was different from my usual clients. She wasn't just married to a wealthy man. She was married to an icon. Marcus Thorne was a tech mogul, a charismatic innovator whose face was on the cover of business magazines. He was a philanthropic giant, a pillar of the community. He was Julian, but on a global scale, with 100 times the resources and 1,000 times the public adoration. Sarah was terrified. She sat opposite me, a pale, bird-like woman who looked like she might shatter if I spoke too loudly. As she told her story, I felt a chilling, sickening sense of déjà vu. The story was mine, just decorated with more expensive furniture. The initial whirlwind romance, the generosity that slowly morphed into control, the suggestion that she give up her career to manage their charitable foundation, the joint accounts she couldn't access, the monitored credit cards. The demeaning allowance for a woman who technically lived in a $20 million home, but the stakes were higher, and the cage was more sophisticated. He doesn't just check my phone, Eva, she whispered, her hands trembling. He has our home, digitally locked down. I think the security cameras are monitored. The Wi-Fi logs every site I visit. I can't even make a call without him knowing who it was too. And there's our son, Jacob. The one time I tried to leave 2 years ago, he used his team of lawyers to file an emergency motion, claiming I was unstable. He got temporary sole custody. He let me see my own son for 1 supervised hour a week. until I agreed to come home. He will use our child as a weapon and he will win. I looked at this terrified woman and I saw myself in the final suffocating months of my own marriage. But the man she was up against wasn't just a clever manipulator. He was an institution, a man with a public relations team, and an army of lawyers who could bury her in legal filings until she had nothing left. He's hidden everything, she said, tears finally spilling over. Our assets are in a maze of trusts and offshore accounts. My name is on nothing but a massive amount of consumer debt he's racked up on cards I didn't even know existed. If I leave with nothing and I will lose my son. He told me so himself. He said, I will spend millions to make you a ghost. I am trapped. A cold fury and old, familiar feeling settled in my bones. I knew this man. I didn't know his face, but I knew his playbook. He had built the perfect prison, but I was the one person on earth who had the blueprint. You are not trapped. Sarah, I said, my voice steady and calm. You just haven't found the emergency exit yet. We're going to find it together. Taking on Marcus Thorne was a monumental risk, but as I looked at Sarah's desperate face, I knew I had no choice. This was why I had started this firm. This was the final battle of my own war. For the next 2 months, Sarah and I engaged in a quiet, terrifying campaign of counter-espionage. Our sessions weren't held in my office. We met at a different public library every week. We communicated only through the encrypted messaging app on the burner phone I had given her. Our first task was for her to become the perfect, docile, unthreatening wife. She had to lull the dragon to sleep before we could raid his hoard. He needs to believe he has won completely, I coached her. Stop questioning his spending. Seem happy with your allowance. Agree with him. Be the beautiful, thoughtless accessory he wants you to be. Make him feel so secure that he gets careless. While Sarah played her part at home, I started digging. Marcus was brilliant. His finances were a fortress, a series of nested corporate shells and philanthropic trusts designed to be impenetrable. But I knew from my experience with Julian that men like this have a fatal flaw, their ego. They believe they are smarter than everyone else, and they love to admire their own wealth. I told Sarah to look for a device. Not a work computer, not a phone. A personal device, something he used for himself, likely hidden. A private laptop, a tablet, an external hard drive. A week later, she called me from the library, her voice a panicked whisper. I found it, she said, a tablet. It's hidden in a locked safe in his home gym. I saw him open it once. I know the combination. It's the date his first company went public. Of course it was. His monument to himself. Getting the tablet was the most dangerous part of the plan. Sarah had to wait for the one night Marcus was flying to an out-of-state board meeting. My sister Chloe and I parked a block away from her sprawling mansion, acting as lookouts, our hearts in our throats. Sarah had exactly 1 hour dot she got the tablet. She used a high-speed copying device I had given her to clone the entire hard drive onto a thumb drive. The whole time we were on the phone with her, my voice a calm whisper walking her through the steps while Chloe monitored the neighborhood security feeds on her own laptop. When Sarah finally got back in her car, the thumb drive clutched in her hand. We all let out a breath we didn't realize we'd been holding for an hour. Contents of that drive were the smoking gun. It was Marcus's entire hidden empire. He had a digital ledger protected by a simple password, the name of his childhood dog. On it was everything. Hidden real estate holdings in the Cayman Islands, a portfolio of cryptocurrency worth tens of millions, wire transfers to shell corporations. He had meticulously documented his own fraud, never believing anyone would be smart enough or brave enough to find it. Now we had the ammunition. But a direct confrontation was too dangerous. We had to stage a legal ambush. We worked with Sarah's new lawyer, a bulldog of a woman I knew from my own battles. We didn't just file for divorce. We spent a week preparing an emergency motion to the family court, attaching hundreds of pages of undeniable proof of financial fraud and the deliberate hiding of marital assets. The motion requested an immediate ex parte freeze on all known and newly discovered assets. Pending a full investigation, the day we filed, Chloe and I helped Sarah and Jacob disappear. We moved them into a secure private rental I had arranged, months in advance under a corporate name. Their phones were gone, replaced with new ones. They were ghosts. The climax wasn't a shouting match in a living room. It was a quiet legal detonation. Marcus was served with the papers at his office in the middle of a board meeting. I wasn't there, but Sarah's lawyer described the scene to me later. He had apparently laughed when he first saw the divorce filing. Then he began to read the appendices. He saw the account numbers, the screenshots from his secret ledger. His face went white with pure, unadulterated rage. He had been completely and totally outmaneuvered. His kingdom of secrets had been brought down by the two women he had underestimated the most. The battle wasn't over, but the war was won, with his assets frozen and his fraud exposed. His threats were empty. He couldn't touch Sarah. He couldn't use his money to take her son. She had all the leverage. A few weeks later, I got a call from Sarah. She was crying, but for the first time, they were tears of relief. "He's agreeing to a settlement," she said. "He's giving me everything I asked for. Full custody, child support, a fair division of the real assets. He just wants to avoid a public trial. Ava, you did it." "No, Sarah," I said, looking around my small, quiet office. "We did it." After I hung up the phone, I walked over to the large whiteboard where I map out my cases. I took down Sarah's name. I thought about Julian, about the man who had tried to reduce my life to a line item on a budget he controlled. He had intended to break me, but instead he had given me a gift. He had given me a blueprint. He had taught me exactly how the minds of men like him work. He had trained me to become their worst nightmare. He had taught me how to find the keys to any cage. And now I was spending the rest of my life handing those keys to anyone who needed them.